Do you know how powerful you are?
Welcome to Rise Urban Nation.
Welcome everybody to Rise Urban Nation.
Reshaping and elevating your mindset to help you achieve what you believe.
Sometimes we don't even see our own greatness. You can't be what you can't see.
And connecting Black cultures to build a community of talent and success.
Black people need to realize that they are assets. You are an asset.
When we rise, you rise.
Come together as a group.
This is Rise Urban Nation with Darrell Evans.
Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, wherever you're at in the world listening to us. Welcome to another episode of the Risepreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Evans. I want to thank you, all the listeners out there. As I said before, if you have not done so, please go to the link below in the notes page and fill out our survey, as we are on set to get more products, services, sponsorships, all that good stuff. Want to get a real good understanding of you that are out there that's rocking with us, so that we can get you the best product services to help you elevate in life and business, wherever you're at. Want to make sure that we get the right things out there for you, and thank you so much for tuning in. This next guest that I have on the show was, you ever had that moment where you feel like you just meet your kinfolk? This is my brother from another mother, and that old saying that steel sharpens iron. I'm not sure if I got that right, but this is one brother that I instantly had a connection with. He is the host of the Mind Shift podcast. Actually, if I want you to go check out his show, I was on his show a week or two ago, did the episode with him. So check out the Mind Shift podcast. We are really on the same journey, in different places in our journey. Well, probably the same place, but we're on the same journey to, shift people's mind, give them that understanding, knowledge, connect them to inspire them to do different, do better, or continue to, in their path to greatness or getting unstuck. And that's what his Mind Shift podcast was really about. It's like, if you ever felt stuck, if you ever wondered, how did you get in the place where you're at, you're not alone. And then he interviews people like myself, and he's just an amazing individual himself, Darrell Evans. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode with Darrell Evans, ladies and gentlemen. The 80-20 rule and Brandon Bashad. You can't see it. It's over there.
Okay.
On that bookshelf.
Yeah. So in fact, Brendan is where I'm usually at 2 times a year. So I've been in his world for about 4 years. So we're usually in Arizona and in San Diego once or twice a year. He's usually in San Diego. And then I'm usually in San Diego just because I enjoy San Diego, and there's usually something else going on down there. But yeah, Brendan's good. Yeah, I'm a book guy. I've been, I've listened to, some of your shows, and, it's interesting. The direction you're taking this show is very, it rang true to my ears when I, because I was, coming up when I chose to be an entrepreneur, I was like the only cat in my world. Now, let's be clear. If you're on the street, you're an entrepreneur. Let's, keep it 100.
But see, even our street cats don't think of themselves as entrepreneur. They be like, they don't. That's you. That's your thing. I'm not. That's not me.
They don't. But if you look at the dynamics of the game, they're entrepreneurs, so
I'm up here trying to tell these street guys, like, look, like the hustle you in now, you could do that same hustle here and then save some lives, save some stress and some bodies, and re-up. And use that same energy and become a corporate hustler or a street entrepreneur hustler, and be a bully in these boardrooms.
Right. I love that. Bully in the boardroom. I like that. Yeah. So anyway, man, I'm here. I'm ready for you, man.
Well, yeah. So you know the premise of the podcast. We're going to get into a little bit of everything. I mean, I have some set questions, but we'll go on a fun tangent. Refresh my memory. How did we get connected? Was it through Matchmaker? Does my assistant reach out?
Yeah. It's interesting. Either Matchmaker or LinkedIn, one of those two. Yep. I don't remember right off the top of my head, but it was one of those two, because it seems to be that's where most of my action's coming from. And I have a podcast, so I don't know if you guys have found me maybe through my podcast. I don't know.
Yeah, because I always like to see the origin story of like how I get connected to people. Like so far, I've been connected to people through friends of friends. There was like a couple of people on Matchmaker, but I always like to have, how did you meet such and such? And do this some linkage, and we find some magic connection somewhere down the road.
Well, this world is a small place today, and it wouldn't be hard to believe that we hadn't crossed some paths with somebody. It's like they always say 6 degrees of separation, and it seems today it's more like 2 or 3 degrees of separation, which always goes back to something I always say, which is don't burn bridges, because you just don't know how close the pathway is to where you might need to go.
Right. Absolutely. So we'll start off with this question. Who is Darrell Evans? And you could go as far as wide. I know that's a deep question. Take that question wherever it takes you today. Who is Darrell Evans?
Today, I would tell you that Darrell Evans is first and foremost a child of God, right? Mm-hmm. I'm an eternal optimist, which guides how I think, how I behave, how I react, how I strategize. And I don't live in airy fairyland in that regard. And through my walk in life, I've realized that the more I could stay positive about a potential direction, outcome, whether that was sports, whether that was, just dealing with the ups and downs of growing up, whether it was dealing with the things I saw in my house growing up that too often we see in Black and brown households. I'm not going to go into it too deep here, but I just somehow became this person who believes in the greater side, the greater and more positive side of outcomes. And so even in the depths of some of my challenges and the depths of some of my adversities, and some of which I caused, let's be clear about that, I've learned to remain optimistic about outcomes. And I think that's what's guided me here. I'm a father. I'm a stepfather. I am a believer that the world is an abundant place, and that if you know something that can help someone else, it is your obligation that if they ask, you should share. I've been in this world of business for a long time. I have trained, coached, mentored, all of the relative words, both for pay and not pay. And I give away the same advice, whether someone pays me or don't pay me, right? Mm. And people say, well, Darrell, why do you do that? Well, it's because if the person can't pay, it doesn't mean they don't need the information. And there was a time I couldn't pay, and someone gave it to me. But I'm just a person today who's just trying to give and trying to live and trying to leave a mark for my family. I'm the first entrepreneur in my family, and I'm privileged and blessed that it's been a good journey. It's been an up and down journey, but it's gotten me here. And I intend to pass down what I've learned to the younger generation, as well as hopefully leave a different situation for our family's future when I'm done.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Now, where do you think that sense of that mindset of abundance and optimism comes from? Because we have different shared experiences with our biological dad not being there, and then another man coming in. And I can know from just speaking for myself that I didn't always have it. Like, it took me a while to grasp the mindset of abundance and optimism in a lot of situations. Where do you think it came from for you?
It's a great question. This is a hypothesis based on how I look back at life. Like, I think, I grew up on the edges of, if there was a triangle of a city, and it's a smaller triangle in this city called Las Vegas some 30 plus years ago, but I grew up inside the triangle along the edges where there were some dynamics, gang life on the external parts of these triangles, and I'm in the middle of it. So I got exposed to all three dynamics. So I saw what that life was like. I'm inside my own house where I had a mother and father who, my dad stepped in when my natural father left, and there was a struggle. So even though I'm in this triangle where there's struggle out in the real world, drugs, alcohol, gangs, et cetera, but then I also had some element of that in my house with abuse and some things like that with my parents. But let me tell you what they did do that set me up. And that was they enforced education, right? We played sports. Like my parents got me involved in football and baseball and basketball, more so the first two. Basketball was a little bit later. And it was in order to play football and baseball, I had to have good grades. It was a prerequisite. So the sport that I came to love, which also I realized looking back kept me away from elements, right? It kept me away from drifting too far left or right into those elements, because I had friends on all sides. I had colleagues, friends, associates. My grandmother would have said, they weren't your friends, they were your associates. And there's a difference. But she taught me very clearly, be careful who you hang with, because, those who call themselves friends may really be associates and they'll turn their back on you. She's a very spiritual person, taught me a lot about the Bible, taught me a lot about spiritual strength and confidence and discernment. I think that was one thing if she passed down a spiritual gift to me, if that's possible, it was the spirit of discernment. And so, but back to your question about positivity and abundance, it came from lack. It came from my perceived perception of lack. I used to feel great when I got a brand new pair of shoes. And I used to think, for whatever reason, when I got that pair, I could run faster somehow. It just was how I thought as a kid. What I didn't know was, my parents, though it was a 2-working household, and we weren't poor, we never missed a meal, but it was what they could afford, right? And I'd later find out that those were $12 shoes. They certainly weren't $70 shoes, $80 shoes, but they were great shoes. I was told no a lot about money. I was told we can't do this. I heard all the things that probably some parents still say today. Money doesn't grow on trees. What do you think I am? What do you think I'm made of money? All of the money ideas, which was an interesting paradigm, because then my dad sat me down at 16-ish, maybe, or 17, as we're starting to have the conversation about college and what I might want to do after, going after high school. And it's amazing that he quoted a principle out of Think and Grow Rich, though I know he'd never read it. He'd never read it. I know he never read it.
Wow.
But he said, you can have or do anything in life you want if you believe in it. Now, that also comes out of the Bible. So we can also, we did grow up in church. And so it's just interesting, as I've grown, how the principles from the Bible and in the books that we all call personal development books, they're all just said in different ways. But I think it was the desire of somehow my mind and my eyes started seeking and looking and comparing and contrasting what I saw in different pockets of the world. Why is this person driving a Mercedes while we're driving an Oldsmobile that when it turns on, it's got blue smoke coming out the back? I don't understand that. Silly stuff like that, right? Why is my man who's one of my boys? We play football together. He was wide receiver on our team. White dude. He's driving this Toyota Supra in high school, bumping. He had a better system than all the brothers in school, right? I mean, what's his folks do? I come to find out his folks weren't loaded. It was a curiosity. It was a curiosity about abundance. It was a curiosity about different things that would cause the world to move financially. And I think that was my first love, was the financial side of it. And as I've learned as the years gone on, and you believe in, I was excited when I heard your statement that you don't work for money, don't chase money, chase doing good things, chase the aspect of success. Money will chase you. And it's something that I learned early, but I resonated when you said that. Anyway, long story short, I mean, it just became so I had this positive aspect of education, which is I was able to see success in that world. Oddly enough, as an athlete playing ball, I didn't have a winning record on any team until I got to high school. So for 3-4 years playing Pee-wee, junior Pee-wee, power, and on both sides, football or baseball. So I was a loser. I was on losing teams, for whatever reason, for years. So I'm doing well in school, but then I'm losing on the field. And so I've been in this world of contrast, and I always like to talk about the pendulum of life sometimes, because there's always the pendulum. It's always contrast between, victory and losing, and success and failure, and A's and F's, and all of these, money and not having money. It's all of these types of, and so I've just tried to live and understand both sides of the pendulum. And I think it's led to that level of curiosity. And I just chose that even though the pendulum could swing to the negative side in some way, shape, or form, I always remembered that there was another side.
I love that. So always remembering the other side. And that's what I try to tell people too. And a lot of why I started the show is based a lot around what you said, like just giving these new concepts to people and doing like a paradigm shift of the mindset of how we see each other as, Blacks or Africans, African Americans, because I lived in both of those worlds, and we see each other in not such great little lights. And I've met so many amazing people that look like us doing amazing things, but somehow there's always this narrative that we not doing anything or we not doing things to that caliber.
Yeah.
When
We
are.
haven't had, obviously, and today we have platforms like this. If you think about media today, if you think about it 20, 30 years ago, we just didn't get the coverage. We didn't get the coverage. We still don't get it as much as we maybe would want it today, but now we don't have to worry about the middleman, right? We can be digital creators. We can be our own media creators. We can tell our own stories. We can, do things like you're doing, which is, bringing shows together, which bring and highlight. And I think we're far better than we were 20 and 30 years ago. Heck, we're better than we were 15 months ago. And I think that's just the growth process of the world and the awareness, of course, of, unfortunately, the tragedies of 2019 and 2020, notwithstanding those that happened prior that didn't get the spotlight, right?
Yeah.
But it takes a situation like a George Floyd and, a Breonna Taylor. And unfortunately, it seemed like those were the tipping point moments in my life. In my life, and now the world just doesn't seem like it can close its eye to it. So I think it's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of my years, I was the only brother in the space, and so it was a lonely journey sometimes.
Well, I feel you. My journey too has been a lonely space. And then magically when I fell into entrepreneur, I started meeting other Black entrepreneurs out there just doing amazing stuff. And I was like, wait, I've never heard of you. And I never heard of this thing. And I never heard of this group. And how did y'all like, and so my curiosity began to overwhelm me. And I was like, we need to tell more of this because I'm out in these schools trying to teach these students or they call me to speak, but they don't know about any of this.
Yeah. It's interesting as we've come up, and I think we come from, of course, different backgrounds, and we don't have necessarily my parents didn't know how to help me be a better entrepreneur. They didn't know how to help me. They didn't throw fire. I mean, they didn't throw water on my dream. They didn't try to put the fire out. They didn't understand it. They understood, go to school, get a good job, get good grades, work in corporate America, blah, 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 do the same, do the traditional stuff. Nothing wrong with it. My grandmother was a little bit more entrepreneurial because she had a real estate license at some point, but she was also a registered nurse. But I think with entrepreneurship, especially in the Black community, in my opinion, and as I've seen it, because now I've coached and worked with thousands of, more than 1,000 companies in the last decade alone, not to mention my journey 20 years prior to that. But in business, in finance, in mindset, in abundance, back to an earlier question, I've had an opportunity through my sales career and through the marketing that I've done. I've touched a lot of humans in my work, and I can sit back and think that there's definitely a mental shift that has to happen. As Blacks, we have not been provided the same level, not just access, but encouragement to pursue those bigger ideas. And in some cases, we don't believe in it ourselves. Like I always say, our journey is as far as we can believe it. But in some cases, if we don't see it, we can't believe it. When in fact, the reality is the truth. We need to believe it, and then we'll see it. And that's a hard paradigm shift. It's not, I'll believe it when I see it. It is, I'll see it when I believe it. And so to carry belief in the midst of adversity, to carry belief when you walk in a room and you're the only one, to carry belief when someone's threatened by your very existence, to carry belief when you are just showing up to do well for everyone, but you've got someone trying to cut you, slice you. I mean, not physically, but like, in the corporate world, trying to step on you and make sure that you get thrown under the bus for something that wasn't your responsibility. And that can damper your belief factor. But I think it starts there in the mind. And I think that's the number one thing people have to work on. And that's partly why I call my podcast the Mind Shift Podcast, because there's no shortage of challenges. Right. And everyone on this planet has challenges. So it's about, can you, again, kind of go back and forth through those pendulums and shift your perspective and stay focused on what you're working on.
The biggest, and it just goes back to what you said earlier, the biggest mindset shift that I had was due to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so forth, because it made me go back, pause, and reflect on life to another deeper level. Because I always do that. I meditate and so forth. But this pause was different. It took me to a place that I hadn't been before. And then when I came out of that cocoon, I came out a whole different person. And I recognized this thing called power, and the power that we give and the power we hold and so forth. And then it changed my narrative of the story that I was carrying with me and made me realize I was playing too small. Like, and I played small because of the narrative that was fed to me from working through corporate America for so long, right?
Yeah.
And then I pushed back against corporate America, and technically I won.
Right.
And it was a scary place to be because they were doing all the wrong things and so forth when the George Floyd situation is not saying the right things. And I sat back like, can I continue to work for a place?
Right.
Or am I going to say something, or like what am I going to do? Like,
yeah.
Because this goes against all my values right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. To your point of meditating, and that was it's been a practice I've been working on now for about 10 years. It's been a growing practice for me. I never understood it when someone mentioned it to me in my 30s, and as I got into my 40s, I started taking it seriously and looking, just exploring. I think my curiosity, it keeps me moving forward. Being curious, even curious about the things I don't understand, right? The things that I don't believe in. Like I feel like if we get educated on what someone else believes, we can be a little bit more empathetic. Though we may not agree, we can be empathetic. And I think empathy carries us a long way in the world of growth, right? You don't have to agree, right? But you have to be empathetic. Let me go back to what you said about the George Floyd. I mean, I had never been more breathless, emotion struck of all, and every life that has been taken with force, unjustified, in an unjustified manner. I just don't know why. I just could not understand. It took me to a place where I'm like, what the, what? And I'm like, this is 2020. Did I just really? And so, to your point, it just makes you take a pause and realize, wow, I'm not the loudmouth. I'm not a loudmouth. Like, I'm not going to be out there popping off. And, so I said, okay, let me use what I do best to do what I do. Like, how do I now refocus and reshift? And where do I go from here doing what I do? Right. How do I empower? How do I, change lives? And how do I work on what is my strength? Because I also believe stay in your lane. Like, I'm not jumping lanes to try to pretend to be something I'm not. I'm not a politician. Right.
Yeah.
There are great people with great voices who have great energies for that. And that's how they're wired. I'm not wired that way. So it did help me think okay, now it's time to do some other things and really bring things to the next level. So I agree with you.
Yeah. So what was the biggest shift for you during that time? So the shift for me was the mindset of doing, like, stepping up to that next level of that scary vision that I had for myself that I had dumbed down for so many years. Like, when I was starting a podcast, people told me to start a podcast for years when they used to hear me speak in classroom, but I never did it, right? Because I was like, I can't start a podcast. I'm not a podcaster. Like, that's about, every excuse in the book, right? The things you tell yourself. And then I was like, after that, I was like, I need to start a podcast so we can see ourselves in a different light, because this ain't it.
Right.
And so,
no, I like it. It's funny that, I started my show in 2019 in the summer, literally after being at a Brendan Burchard event. And he said something at the event, and it was almost as if there was no one else in the room but me, because he was like literally calling me out for sitting on my dream, right? Because, there's so many times as entrepreneurs, and we can get, what we know as to be shiny object syndrome, and we can get distracted. And I had thought about the podcast for 4 or 5 years prior. In fact, I started a video show back in 2009 called Inspirational Words Today. And it was using a brand new platform at the time, which is not even around today. So it was an early attempt at doing a video show, and I actually was just in a different mental space, even though I really wanted to do it. But to go back to your question, after George Floyd, it wasn't a matter of what I needed to start, because at that time, I owned a business. I owned a couple things going on. And one of the companies was in trouble. So we lost 57% of our revenue just a few months prior. So it was a challenging window of time, with everything going on. So I was still in making sure that company got stabilized, and we were making the adjustments necessary economically for that. But from an emotional standpoint, it heightened my awareness to something that's already been a part of my vision. So I sat down in 2004 with a coach at that time and outlined a 25-year plan. That 25-year plan was important to me. It matters to no one else, maybe on the outside, except those that might be positively impacted by the vision that I had. That vision called for a change of career and a change in life structure in 2010. I made that change. I didn't know that when I wrote that plan in 2004, 2010 would require the change, but it did. And that's what led me to where I'm at today. And so I think there was a level of urgency that kind of popped up because life can be taken in a second for no reason. That was an interesting, not that it had never been true. It had always been true. It is always true. And it doesn't have to be because of police brutality. We could, he can take us off this planet anytime he wants. He can call our number anytime he wants. But for whatever reason in that situation, because I struggled with a mastermind group that I'm in, there was dialogue, and I'm in a 17-person mastermind group. Everyone at the table that's not true. Almost everyone at the table is white, Caucasian, and there's one group one company at the table that is from Latin America. But in one of the meetings one day, we're having a conversation. They were, George Floyd and police brutality, and there was just this dialogue going on. This is maybe July or August, and I wasn't saying anything. And to your point, when you were in corporate and there were some things going on, there was just a few remarks being made by people that I respect in this room that were just out of context. And so it turned into a 30-minute or so, not debate. I said what I wanted to say for the next, it wasn't 30 minutes. I may have gone on a 5 to 7 minute discussion, and then it led to some Q&A like why I am afraid every time I get pulled over or when I get pulled over. I don't get pulled over a lot, but why I have been afraid. And the 3 times it could have been me. The one time I had been pulled over because there had been a bank robbery and I fit the description. Why one night when I was sitting with one of my friends after hanging out we either went out to a party or a club, whatever we did, and we were sitting in a parking lot on the way home talking to 2 girls, and 50 is across the street waiting for us to get done so he could follow us down the street, and he pulls us over in this dark area. They pulled us over in this dark area. And so I because they see me as Darrell, the successful business guy, Darrell, the mindset guy, the business guy, the entrepreneur, the sales, the marketing guy. Darrell's black. Let's be clear. So, I remember, and it wasn't 2016 or 17 that I remember getting pulled over by Highway Patrol. I ran a red light. I ran a red light. It was my fault. I ran a light. I had a reason to get pulled over. I ran a red light. But his demeanor was a little sketchy for a red light on a major arterial. Like, we're not talking, and I just enlightened the group about how I was feeling, because I think they thought, well, Darrell doesn't live on that. He doesn't do anything wrong and this and that. He's never been in trouble, blah, blah. No, I'm black. I'm black, period. So not every encounter with the police has been that. There's only been one that's been physical, and it wasn't physical to any extent that left me injured or anything of that nature, but it was out of context for the purpose. Like, you pulled me over for speeding. You pulled me over for running a red light. You pulled me over because you saw us talking to some girls, whatever. I remember one, look, I don't want to go too long on this thing, but I've had my fair share, and it's like people didn't understand it. So in this moment around this circle with a bunch of people that respect me and I respect them, their perspective was goofy. And I'm like, no, you're missing the point. We're not saying all police are bad. No, you're missing the point. And so my change was just, again, back to I hated to belabor that point, but it was just a level of urgency about some things that are on that plan. And it just heightened my awareness that time is still fragile on this place we love called Earth, regardless of the circumstances. So that was kind of the big change for me. And then, of course, being a supporter and advocate in the ways that I do best to, I do some work with young people through my buddy, Richard Jack, who's, the executive director of a organization that's working with not only the youth, third, fourth, fifth grade, black and brown boys, to get them away from, get them into the right lifestyle etiquettes of, get them taught the things in life when they're struggling in that window so that they don't get into the junior high school years and get caught up in the peer pressure and run on all the way to his program for teens from 16 to 28. So I sit on his board and, just try to watch him with his vision and help him with his vision. And so
I
just
love that.
putting a priority on some things. Yep.
Yeah. And I resonate with that level of urgency, and I appreciate the whole dialogue and story, because as in a couple months we come on the 1 year anniversary, so I think that's by the time this drops, that'll be a good segue into probably what the world is feeling. And I wanted to have that level of urgency with my Black people and people around the diaspora to do that mindset shift. Okay, how can you take back your power? Like, whether it's start a business, get an education and educate yourself, listen to a podcast, start getting a little knowledge that allows you to, take back control of your life in the way that you want to, control it. What does success mean to you? Redefining it for you, yourself, your community, and work with others to kind of build that amazing thing. Because the first part of my vision of this platform is to educate and show other people's story. The second part, I hope, is people have that mindset shift, and then we as a culture start to work together to see how we build together.
Yes.
Because I don't think anybody's coming to save us. We're going to have to save ourselves. So
yeah. No, it's a great point. It's a great point. It's one of the biggest things I've noticed over the last 20 plus, going on 30 years. In business, especially because that's my domain, in marketing and business growth and entrepreneurship, which I'm super passionate about. I believe we need to be entrepreneurs. I don't believe there is something I do believe in, and some people get upset with me when I say this. I'm not a big believer in side hustles. Like, I need people to go all in. Like, you won't get to your destination if you're just playing around with it, sticking your toe in the water with it. And we need to be focused for a period of time on one thing and one thing only. Make that successful. I run across too many folks who look like us they got 5 things going on. You're never going to get there with 5 things. And I've always been, even though I didn't come from the startup world, I would learn later that it was a startup mode mentality. I'd learned later from books like The Lean Startup, from Eric Ries. I never know how to pronounce his name, Ries or Rise. The Lean Startup. I've learned from books. I've learned concepts like from the 80-20 principle, Richard Koch. The book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. I read these books later, but I had already adopted the mentality, and that is focus on, you could think of the word, there's an acronym, I guess, with the word focus. Later, I learned that as well. So it's just very interesting that it just seemed like my wiring was there somewhere. And that is follow one course until successful. If you break down the word focus, follow one course until successful. Now, and that to me has been when I first started in the financial services world. Right out of college, I got a finance degree. I thought I wanted to go work on Wall Street as an analyst, and the world of sales and marketing was calling me. And so I stepped my toes in that world for 2.5 years. And of all the people that I could sell financial services to, I chose one niche to go after. And for whatever reason, it just seemed to resonate with me. Some of my friends were going after doctors. Some were going after engineers. For whatever reason, I chose lawyers. Right. And I just focused on lawyers for like the first year, 2 years. When I left and went into the real estate, financial services industry with the mortgage lending, I focused only on working with people who had been, because we were coming out of a high interest rate window in the 90s, where people had mortgages for 7, 8, 9% interest if their credit wasn't perfect. Right. So they had been given mortgages that were now 2 and 3 points above prime. So I focused only on helping people get out of those mortgages and help them improve their credit, help them get their credit back intact so they could get out of the 2 points is a lot of money, right?
Yes, it is.
2 percentage points, 3 percentage points is a lot of money. So that was a focus. And then then the next focus was on first-time home buyers. And it was only on first-time home buyers, similar concept, who had been coming to me who didn't have great credit. So we spent time getting their credit improved so I would not give them some goofy interest rate loan, right? Where all of this predatory lending really ended up bringing down the world. I was doing the opposite. I was getting people out of those situations because, unfortunately, the world had no problem putting people in, the banking system, all that had no problem burying people with these 2 and 3 and 4 and 5% higher pieces of financing, which is predatory, if you want to call it. It's like, it reminded me of the payday loans, all this garbage, right? So going back to all this, I just believe in help, getting people started. And when I talk to companies today, I'm usually having to get them to stop doing 18 things and bring it down into this 1 or 2 things. And it's surprising because we feel like we're missing something. Like, fear of missing out is real. And I have a little of it, but I also know how to silo my energy. And that's what I work with companies on today, is just siloing the energy. Is it something in human resources we need to take care of? Is it something in sales? Is it something in marketing? Is it something in your own, operational structure? I remember one of my coaches, by the way, you've heard of Theme. I get a lot of, I get coached by a lot of people. So as much as people look to me, I've always believed in coaching, mentorship, and being in masterminds. And I never pretend I know anything. Like I'm still, someone asked me today, he said, what's one of the things you think keeps you going every day? And I said, I wake up every day and pretend I don't know jack. I just do. but you're the expert, but I pretend I know nothing, right? It keeps me humble, right? It keeps me, in the world today, things change in an instant. So you can't take this, well, I've been doing it 30 years. So nothing I do today existed 30 years ago. Nothing. Mm-hmm. The internet didn't exist 30 years ago when I first started as an entrepreneur. I sold stuff out of a trunk of my car, off of a table with no internet. One of my first successes in marketing was using a fax machine. And we don't have time for that story, but a fax machine. Some of your listeners don't even know what a fax machine is. They're going to have to Google it. They're going to have to Google it.
The younger crowd will be like, "You fax machine?
What is a fax machine?"
I think it's that thing we saw in the museum last year.
So what I'm saying is you got to stay sharp. And so anyway, I kind of went off tangent there, but
no, I love this. And you got amazing stories. So, I'm gonna have to bring you on another time so we can go through some of these stories in detail. So let's get into a little bit of the journey. Yeah. One thing I want to start with, because I know you said straight out of school you went into finance, and what I always like to do is I like to ask people what their first job is to give people context. It's not where you start, but it's where you end. And then there's even something in that first start that you can learn that you sometimes take with you through your journey. So, what was your first job?
So, the first job, it was a paper route. If that qualifies, it was a paper route. But let me tell you a really quick story, because the first job story really is the big story that catapulted my life, though. I started a paper. I had a paper route, right? So that was one. But then I got a real job. I applied for a real job, got hired at McDonald's, but it was across town. I had to take 2 buses to get there. I went to 1 day of training, and then I got a phone call from the grocery store up the street, because when you first trying to get a job, you put an application everywhere. And so the first day I go to training at McDonald's, I come home and then I get a call from the grocery store, which is walking distance from the house. It's 10 minutes up the street. So I McDonald's, I got to cut that loose because I need to be close to the house. I don't want to be on 2 buses for an hour just to come make $3.35 an hour. Because that's what minimum wage was when I started. But 3 months later, after I took the Lucky's job, Lucky Supermarket, it's now called Albertsons, football season came up. And they didn't want to work around my football schedule. So they fired me. They let me go. It would be 5 months later that family friend gives me a call. He knows I'm looking for a job. He calls me sometime in late December. This is 1986. And says he works at Taco Bell. He says, if you want a job, you got to be here by 5:30. And I don't know what time it is. It's 3 or 3:30. I just got out of school. And I hopped my behind down there. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no idea. And he says, Darrell, all we got for you is a fry cook. Okay, tell me about that. You're gonna cook taco shells. Like back in the day, everything was fried and cooked original in the store. Today they're all packaged up. But I took a job, $3.35 an hour, an oily grill, and a hot polyester suit uniform, right? And I cooked taco shells, and all the shells that you think about at Taco Bell, we made those originally there. And that was my first job. To me, that was my first job. That was my first job because it was interesting, because I tell people the story that I did that job so well. You'd have thought I was the president of Taco Bell. I did that job so well that that they entered me in a taco shell frying contest. You know how silly this sounds? You know how silly this sounds right now? I got put in a Taco Bell frying contest. Are you it's not hula hoop. It's not ping pong. It's a Taco Bell frying shell contest. So anyway, me and this guy named Mike, brother out of Philly, if I remember correct, he was out of Philly. We went head to head. I don't remember who won, quite frankly. Anyway, what I say though is I did that job so well. They were like, man, this guy's he excels at what he does. And before you know it, I was promoted to a team lead. And then an assistant manager. And so I'm 16 when I started, and I'm still finishing high school, going to whatever. I decided not to go off to college somewhere else. And at 20, I got promoted to a general manager.
Nice.
And before I left college, because I did take a couple years off from college, but I ended up running 2 stores, and I was a general manager for 7 years. And I ended up being there for just a little bit over 10 and a half years. I was at Taco Bell. And what I didn't realize while I was there, and I later learned, was I learned everything about P&Ls. I learned everything about hiring, training, empowering, because Taco Bell is a system, just like McDonald's or KFC and all these companies today. I was being groomed in my own, because my mindset was to own a business. Like I started my first business at 20.
Yeah.
But the lessons learned at Taco Bell, that was my first job. It taught me, I failed as a general manager the first 2 years. Failure simply means I wasn't hitting my numbers. I was stressed out. I was still operating. So as an assistant manager in that system, you're still doing a lot of stuff on the shift, but you're only responsible for an 8, maybe or 10-hour shift. And you're still doing things because you came up from an executor. Remember, I was an executor at the fry station, to then going to the back kitchen, to then becoming a prep, to then going to the front of the house, to becoming what they call a steamer, stuffer, and all these other technical titles. I just graduated through the execution processes. Then I became an assistant manager. That's typically how you become one. And then when you become a general manager, though, now you're a leader. You're not a doer. And I had a hard shift in understanding: lead, don't do; empower, don't tell, right? And so I got my early lessons. I'll never forget the lady named Sophia Yap, who said, Darrell, you've got to empower them to fail, coach them on improvement, and your job will get a lot easier. And that was about 2.5 years into that general manager run. I wasn't failing like they were going to fire me, but I was stressed out and I was wanting to go back to school. And before you know it, in the next half a year to a year, I was back in school full time while still running the restaurant. People couldn't understand that I was basically in the restaurant 6 hours a day. I'm basically in the restaurant hitting my numbers 6 hours a day because I'm in school full time too. And so it was an early lesson in leverage, in empowering and training and hiring. And here was one of the little piece, and I'll share this because I think it was, when I look back, industry average for turnover at a fast food restaurant was 200+%. 200+%, meaning you'll turn your crew over 2 times a year, if not more. And I was running in the 60 to 70% range. So I learned something about connecting with people for $3.35 an hour. And maybe over the years it had gone up to $4.25, because they were raising it every so slightly. But we weren't paying people a lot of money. This wasn't a lot of money for folks, right? How I could get them to show up, do their job, do it effectively. We were meeting our numbers. It was looking back, it was one of the best lessons of my life.
Yeah. And I think it taught probably, I'm pretty sure a lot of the things that you learned in that, you learned how there's the focus theme in there from being the fry cook, and then from P&Ls and then those systems, learning about how you need systems in your business to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And then that leadership quality, which is very important.
Yeah.
So I love all that. I love that whole story. So I know you started your businesses, your entrepreneurial businesses at a young age at 21. Well, first, let me go back to this. So for people who don't know you, what businesses are you currently in and what you currently do?
Yeah. So
a little bit.
So currently I've been the co-founder of a digital marketing agency called Yoka Local. We started here in Las Vegas 2010. I think we officially took our first customer 2011, middle of recession. And so for the last decade, we've been helping small and mid-sized firms, essentially accelerate revenue through digital channels, all of the traditional channels you can think of: Facebook, Twitter, SEO, paid ads. But we have a specific framework that we've used, a proprietary framework that we've used. And so we bring we're basically like a marketing department. So we're not just a service provider or vendor. So that's what we've been doing primarily. I'm also a coach and consultant. I started the Mindshift podcast a couple of years ago. And we're working towards launching the Mindshift Business Academy, the Mindshift Growth Accelerator, which are going to focus on younger entrepreneurs by way of experience who are maybe still running it solo or maybe, 1 or 2 person teams, and really coming in to help them build those frameworks around growth. And so I've got 3 models that I use relative to the entrepreneur's strength, the execution strengths, and then the team strengths. And so those are the things that have been my superpower, or I've developed as superpowers over the years. And then as a bigger venture, I'm working on collaborating with other individuals who have what I call knowledge capital, right? Knowledge capital, and building a collective group. I'm not sure if your audience is familiar with turnaround companies. Where companies are in trouble and they bring a turnaround company in. That turnaround company brings their group of people in and brings all the team, the talent, the expertise. And in some cases, they're maybe taking part equity of the company or whatever the case is. I'm not trying to be a guy that comes in and takes companies like venture capitalists. I'm sorry. I love venture capital. I love the stories and all that, but I'm not trying to take an entrepreneur's business. I want to see entrepreneurs thrive so that they can build legacy for their families. But I see a lot of them struggle through my years, my decade now of talking to thousands of companies. There's just things that I know and collections of people that I've worked with. And I feel like collectively we can bring that knowledge and experience to companies that have good businesses, good products, and where we don't have access to all the capital. I'm not a venture capitalist, but I am looking from the venture model at how we can come in and help these companies thrive. And why do we want to do that? Number one, we want to start helping companies build legacy, like legacy. It's not just income. Like starting a business today is easy. But it's one thing is if you build the business and if the business doesn't earn revenue when you're not there, it's not a business. Mm-hmm. If the business requires you to be in it, it's not a business, right? Mm-hmm. And I think people get, they get it twisted. Like, I've got this great business. Yeah, well, what happens if you go on vacation? I've been on vacation a long time. Yeah, it's not a business. Mm-hmm. What happens when you're on vacation? Well, I've got to take my laptop and my phone, and I usually am taking some calls. Well, that's not a business. Yeah. Businesses create systems to be run by people, right? And the business then can serve the owner.
Yeah, and that's so important. And that's the hard lesson I'm learning right now as we speak, that all my businesses require me to be present, right? Yeah. And then so I hit this wall of time. Like, all right, I ain't got no more time.
Yeah, we all been there.
And so I was like, all right, so if that's the case, in order for me to have the level of success to help more people, I need time back, then I need assets. And so I need to turn these businesses to assets. So where my time is not needed for these businesses to run or money to be made.
Yeah. And we're not saying a completely out of the business, but you've got to make sure that the business won't crumble if you're not touching it. And so 10 years, and I had my experiences, right? I did about 15 years of running a business or two, and I was that guy. Like, so these are my own hard lessons. And even though I made good money, even though I had a good life, don't get it twisted, there was an exhausting aspect of it that was like, I'm doing something wrong here. Like, with all of what I know, I either haven't put in the right systems, I haven't hired the right people. And these are all subtle shifts. And that's something I really believe in. And that is when you start building teams and systems, your job as an entrepreneur is to be the visionary, and you have to be the architect of what you want to see in the future. And then you've got to bring the right people in and resources. I read a great book back in the day. It's called Good to Great, Jim Collins. And one of the key concepts in that book talked about building teams. And a very simple thing struck me at that time. And it was basically your job when you're bringing on and building a team is to get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, the right people in the right seats. And too often we hire people and just say, hey, I need you to do some stuff. Well, what do you want me to do? A little bit of everything. And unfortunately, human beings aren't wired that way. We all have unique gifts and talents and DNA. And so what happens is I just was counseling one of my companies that I work with, and we were talking about 3 people that they're letting go. And I'm like, well, they may not have been wired. They were wired for what you hired them for. And then you started having them do these other things, and they aren't wired for that. And their failure came from that. But you almost forgot that you hired them for this. And so if we stretch people because of our need, and so I've been a big believer in making sure you identify what a person's core, I just call it superstar DNA. It's just my own phrase for a superstar. Their DNA is the definite natural ability that this person has. It's not only their interest, but it's their ability, right? And that means if you put someone in a role that allows them to shine through their natural ability, they will run through a brick wall for you, not because you asked them to, but because they were wired to do it anyway. And it's interesting. When I hire and I am looking for a clear definition of what I want their outcome to be in the role, and I'm looking for someone who believes that role is their ideal job. So when I talk to people now, when we get people hired, they look at the job description and they're like, that was my ideal role. We explain the job in such detail that they say it's my ideal job. So I'm not worried now that they're going to perform. There may be personality issues and team fit. I mean, those are some dynamics you still got to work on. But I want the job description to call out to them. Mm-hmm. Not just say, I think I'll sign up for this job because it may be interesting. No, I want the description to call their name. And it's been very successful now the last 5 to 6 years that we've been doing this. And so passing that on, I just passed that on to one of the companies I work with the other day. And so anyway, so those are some of the.
I love that you said that, because this goes back to the point that you had alluded to earlier when you heard me say, do what you love what you do, don't chase the money, let the money chase you. Because in my time in HR and workforce development, when I connect people to a job that has their core values, they're walking in their purpose and their true and unique gift. Woo,
yeah, it's magic. Man, it's magic.
It's just magic.
It's magic.
Like, and I had to recognize that too after, leaving high school and college, like after I left a role because it just didn't fully fit me. And then I decided to take less money to do something. And then I added so much value that, companies start throwing money at me like, oh, we got to keep him, because if he leaves, we're in trouble.
We're in trouble. and it's a good. So you just made a great point, right? People don't leave jobs they love. They leave bosses they hate. See, and you just talked about it, right? You were like, hey, a year ago, you're like, man, what you started feeling and sensing, it wasn't maybe that the work wasn't fulfilling. It was like, man, looking around the circumstances, now you're starting to see an atmosphere that doesn't conducively fit your value system. So those are some interesting things that I think about. But yeah, give them something they love and they'll do some crazy things for you.
Yeah, then they promote you and like, hey, could you help us create the value system just so you don't leave? We'll throw some extra dollars. Like, we understand we messed up, so help us.
We'll take the extra dollars too. We'll take the extra dollars. We'll take the extra dollars.
So let's do this. Let's go through the steps that you took to kind of get into because from finance to going to SEO marketing, that's quite a leap. So what was the steps that you took to kind of get into that?
Yeah, it sounds complex. It's actually not as complex. It's not as complex as it sounds, although it's an interesting road. So again, I started my first business at 20 while I was in college, while I was running the general manager business, right? So I had to learn how to sell. I had to learn, marketing. I then got a real estate license in 92. So now I'm working and mentoring in an office with a bunch of really top successful real estate agents. And I came across a guy who taught me this aspect of direct response marketing, which essentially was direct mail to a target audience with one message. Going back to that, follow one course until successful. And this is where the fax machine came in. I'll tell the short story as quick as I can because it catapults the reason why internet marketing made a lot of sense to me. I would send a letter to a first-time home buyer, or I would send a letter to a potential home buyer, and the advertisement would say, buy a house with little or no money down. Call 1-800-XYZ, extension 101. On extension 101, it was an automated line with a voice message on it. And it was basically an advertisement. And it would advertise an option to get a free report on how to buy a house with little or no money down. Enter your phone number and we'll fax you the report, or we can mail it out if you want to leave your address. So that was the early days of what I would call an opt-in page, except it was an opt-in phone line. So I would send these out, people would call in. And I learned this from this guy who was the number 2 agent in the state. Catapult to 2003, 2004, the internet is popping. I built my first website in the mortgage industry. And then I realized a little company called Quicken Home Loans was on the internet blowing up, which today they're called Rocket Mortgage. I said, you know what? I'm saying the same thing to the same people over and over and over again. Why don't I put that on a website? Why don't I put that in an email sequence? And so I started using email marketing. Instead of getting on the phone with everybody I was talking to, I would talk to them. And then if they weren't ready to buy for 6 or 8 months, I would send them an email sequence educating them for the next 8 to 10 months so that I was top of mind. And then next thing you know, comes out with YouTube, 2007. Now I start recording videos, and now I'm recording everything that's in the top of my head, all the frequently asked questions. I put them up on a YouTube channel, and now people are finding these videos from outside the country, all over the country, not just in my market, because Vegas was a hot market at the time. And so now I'm getting another aspect of leverage that I was like, I'm not even talking to these people, and they're finding my content, and they're already kind of sold before they ever get to me, where before I would get a customer and I had to do the whole trust building, and I'd answer 18,000 questions. And sometimes the meeting was 2 hours, and it was an important meeting, and we needed to take the time we needed to take to get them comfortable. But I realized that today they call it content marketing. Today they call it, all I was doing was recording what was in my head. And so that was the triggering event of seeing that leverage component of, I wrote 52 emails in that first sequence. Now, some people say that's crazy, but I wrote 52 emails in this sequence because I'm like, hey, if they're going to buy in the next 12 months, I want to stay top of mind every week for the next 12 months without a sales pitch. And so I crafted 52 pieces of information, and that was part one. Then I crafted all these videos. And so that was just how it worked. And so 2008-9 comes around, the market crashes, and the internet saved my behind. Now, the company I own, we had to close because the way the government was set up and the way the banking system, they cut our credit off. The internet saved if I didn't have the internet, Vegas, most people don't know this, but Vegas was selling somewhere between 3,000 to 4,500 homes before the crash. We went down to about 800 homes a month during the crash. And 60% of those purchases were cash. So nobody was getting financing. The very few people were 300. So we were going from 3,000 loans a month down to 300 loans a month. And
wow.
Yeah. Now I did have some window in there where we were really hurting, but the internet was the very thing that was interesting. I was getting calls from people who wanted to pay cash, but would still call and talk about financing from Canada, from the Ukraine, from Korea. I mean, it was very interesting. So that became, the internet pulled me in when I saw the power of it. And I saw the power of the leverage. And so then I'm meeting with business owners 2008, 2009, who had businesses, who were my clients, who wanted to refinance their houses to get equity out of their houses to help their businesses. And they couldn't get the financing. And then I was asking them how they were marketing their businesses. And they're marketing their businesses still the old traditional way: television, phone book, all the traditional stuff. They were still spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 on a phone book page, one whole page, $4,000 a month. So I'm like, hey man, do you know we should probably be doing SEO? And so that's what got me started doing some consulting, helped at a bunch of businesses. And then me and my partner hooked up and started our company. And so we've been very successful. We've been fortunate. I don't want to say very successful. We've been fortunate we got started at a good time. And even today, we're even in a better time because the pandemic, of course, shined another light on how you need the internet. And you need these new media channels. So we've been blessed to help generate, well over 300 million in revenue for companies. And that's really what we do. So while we are a marketing company, we are in the revenue generation business. Like, companies don't keep us around just to be doing, just to post tweets and just to run Instagram. They don't do that. We work to drive awareness, leads, and sales. And that's how we built our system.
I love that. So now, for the people who are listening and they say they're inspired by your story, they're inspired by your journey, and they want to get into this, what would you say the 3 steps that they should take to try to, whether one, they want to start using SEO to build their business, or 2, start a marketing business similar to yours? Well, like, I don't know if both of those advice would be the same, but not to give it to the people.
Not the same, but let's say you're the person who hasn't done anything online today, and let's just take SEO for example. The easiest thing you can do today is sit down, close the door for 1 to 2 hours, turn off your phone, and take your expertise and empty your brain of every question you've ever been asked about your product or service through first of all, the sales process, the in process, and the service process post-sale. Break it up in 3 categories. One of my mentors calls it the before, the during, and the after. If you just break down all of the questions that you've ever been asked, because today, about 40% of the search queries online today are people asking questions to get answers to things that are on their mind. So if you just start there without even being super, super technical, then you can begin creating content for your website. You can do it with video, you can do it with podcasts, you can do it with text. But from an SEO perspective, you're still going to want to do it with text. Put out at least a 600 to 1,000 word breakdown of that content and that message, and then move on to the next question. And I would also say, if you're really thinking about it, if you're an expert, I work with a lot of experts and have a program coming out called Expertise at Scale. I would do it with video, and then you can transcribe everything and then get a writer to clean that up into a nice blog post. So that's probably one of my best early tips for anyone who's just getting started with SEO. And you don't have to worry about all the technical jargon and sure, there's some SEO things. And by the way, I'm happy to, maybe send a follow-up video, but
and we're going to tell the people how to get a hold of you too, because I have a strong feeling that they might have questions. Yeah. Now, for the other one, like, what was some advice you would give to someone? Oh, and I realize we're going over time. Do you have?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. Time to stay? Okay, all right.
It's Friday. I don't have any. I don't have anything to do.
I appreciate that. that. So, what's some advice would you give to someone who would like to start a career in your industries, and how to kind of get started.
Yeah.
Foot in the door.
So getting involved in digital marketing today is probably one of the easiest things you can do on the planet. It's almost as easy as it was 20 years ago when I got started in the mortgage industry. It's easier than becoming a real estate agent. It's easier than becoming a financial services professional. Today, you have to get educated on how the platforms work, meaning you got to get the 101 of SEO, Google ads, Facebook ads, whatever it is your niche is. That's easy. But I would tell you that the number one thing is you need to get experience under your belt. You can't just be a theorist when you're taking companies' money to do marketing, right? And so it's one of the problems with the industry, and that is you can go to udemy.com and you can buy courses from those platforms. You can go to companies like mine, where we teach all of our methodologies. You can there's a lot of places to buy courses, but the best advice I would tell you is to find a low risk situation where you can get involved with an agency that has an agency or a consultant or a marketer that's doing what you want to do, and get in their world. So you can not only, because listen, what happens on the chalkboard is not how it happens in real life, right? You can go to Facebook's blueprint and learn Facebook's blueprint, and you can learn all of the stuff that they teach you about how to run Facebook ads. That is not how the real world works. What you can go to Google's, all of Google's free training. You're going to get the basics. You're going to get the nuts and bolts, but that's not how it works in the real world. So what I would say is get the information, but then get the experience underneath someone who's got so that means, if that means volunteer your time, if that means shadow them for six months, if that means ask for permission to work on a low level account that you can get experience on, it pains me. Darrell, I can't, the only reason why when companies come to me or my company, they're in pain, man. And it hurts because everybody is flying around calling themselves marketers. And the stories that I hear are just, it's almost like crime. It's like crime. Like you're just taking people's money. Some of these people out here are just taking business owners' money based on the business owners are feeling pressed, especially in a world where we are today, where physical contact and face-to-face sales and conventions have been shut down, and conferences and all of the traditional things that maybe old school businesses would do. Get some experience and do it right. Be a professional. That's what I would say. Be a professional. There are more moving parts today in digital marketing than there ever have been in marketing, in my experience. You know, it used to be about creative. It used to be about, like, if you think about TV, radio, billboard, it was about the creative message that went into the advertisement, and then it was a spray. If I put a billboard on the side of the road, do I have to get into demographics and psychographics? No. Do I have to get into how my customer behaves? No, because the car is either driving by or it's not. That's it. If I put it on a TV, if I do a television commercial, I have to come up with a creative commercial, a hook, a jingle, and all this stuff. And I just have to get it in front of people watching certain TV shows who I think, based on the Nielsen ratings, might be my target audience. So what I say is advertising has changed from an impressions business, an impression share business. Digital today is a targeted marketing business. Today, we use platforms where in Google, we know that person journeyed to Google to search for something. I have to be better at showing up there. If someone's on Facebook and I decide to interrupt their social experience, I better damn well interrupt the right person. So you just don't show your ad to people. If you sell, if you're a restaurant, let me just take the most simplest example. Restaurants come to us all the time. I love restaurants. They just don't pay us that much, so we don't do a lot with them because they don't think of marketing as an investment. They think of it as a cost center. But let's just take a restaurant. Marketers should not advertise to the whole city for the restaurant that's in the west quarter of the city. Your job is to get the 5-mile radius, depending on how big your city is. I'm going to use my city as an example. It's illogical for someone to want to go much more than 5 miles to get to a restaurant unless you're a premium joint down on the strip. Make sure everyone in the neighborhood, I can't tell you, Darrell, how many restaurants in my area are great restaurants. I ain't never heard a thing from them. They just assume that they put the restaurant up, and they just assume I'm going to drive by, and they just assume that even though it's in the parking lot that I shop at the grocery store all the time, I'm going to see them. We were looking for chicken wings one time. We moved into an area in the city, and we were new to the area, and there wasn't a very visual chicken wing dominant, joint, but there's all these pubs and all these little different types of venues. And it turned out that we stumbled into this one place and it had these great chicken wings. We'd already been here 3 years. I ain't seen one advertisement from this restaurant. And restaurants, as we've seen in the pandemic, got crushed. And so there's just simple things. But back to the person who's getting in the business, there's a lot more to learn. There's a lot more to understand. Get mentorship. I always say that if you see someone doing what you want to do yourself, to see if you can get into that person's world, even if it's for free, for a while, for a period of time, and get the real story behind these campaigns, get the real story behind the execution, because digital marketing is both strategy and execution. A lot of people today are out here with this execution mindset, and you see a book over my shoulder right here called The Art of War. And one of the key concepts I take out of that book, and one of the key concepts I've learned, is tactics before strategy is the noise before defeat. See, everybody out here are great tacticians. Everybody out here can set up a Facebook account. Everybody can set up a Google account. Everybody can set up YouTube. Everybody can set up Instagram and TikTok. But do you have a strategy? Do you have a strategy that, first of all, allows you to find your ideal customer, connect with your ideal customer, and build trust with them so that it leads them closer to the buying process? And that's what I see.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So it's that strategy, and especially that Art of War book is good. So anybody who's listening, make sure y'all pick that up. You dribbled all sorts of gems. All right. So what do you think the future has in store for your industry?
This industry is blowing up. I think right now, I think if I look at just digital advertising, I think it's a $350 or $400 billion industry right now. It's going to $650 just in the next until I think the projection was 2026 that I read. So that's a 50% increase in that world. More and more companies today, especially with the pandemic that happened, more and more companies are realizing that if they didn't pay attention to digital, or they didn't think it was for them, or if the business had been business as usual prior to the pandemic, I don't think their minds will ever go back to business as usual 100%. So I think that those numbers could even be more significant. I think right now we are heading towards 4.2 billion people using social media is what the projection is between now and 2024, 2025, I think. That's literally half the planet on social media. And what is social media if you really think about it? Social media, like it or don't like it. By the way, people complain about social media, and I hear a lot of executives and CEOs like social media is just for kids. No, it isn't. Social media is today's new television and radio. It's today's new television and radio, and we hold it in the palm of our hand with a device that's more powerful than anything that's almost ever been created to this point. What it's simply saying is if we get to a point where 4.2 billion people out of the 8 billion that are seemingly on this planet are on social media, then if it is the new TV and the new radio, then that is where we advertised in the past. Why wouldn't we then advertise and market there in the future? So social media is going to be a huge part of it. But the one thing about social media people misunderstand is your job isn't to do social media the way television commercials were ran in the day. When television commercials came in and just tried to pitch you something at the moment, that's not really the right way to do social. So social is a way to build relationships. It's a way to build trust. It's a way to build visibility. So when we're talking to people about social media, we're saying, number one, you're not visible online. You're visible in your community. Maybe you're visible, but you're not visible enough. Number two, you're not building relationships and trust. Number three, you're not inviting people to come closer to your business model. And it's all relevant, and it's all there, and it's all available. So
yeah, I love that. I love that. So, Darrell Evans, we're getting to the end of this interview, and I almost don't want to stop because we having a great conversation. Yeah. But I understand we can't be talking for 3 hours. We're not Joe Rogan.
I know. He does. He pulls it off too.
Yeah. I don't know how he does it, but
good stuff.
So let's end on this note. What's one good lesson life has taught you that you can get to the people?
Man, there's more than one. But if I had to give a lesson that I wish I would have given myself in my early 20s, and it is believe in yourself a little sooner. Believe in yourself a little sooner. And through all of what you've heard today, hopefully you've heard something that inspired you in some way. But I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that I struggled with belief. I struggled with acceptance. I struggled with believing that I was ready for the moment. I struggled that I could do more than I did at that moment. There were times when I've been in my career where I thought that was the golden road. That was it. I made it. And by the way, this is not to, I'm not a superstar in any way, shape, or form by any stretch of the imagination. But in my estimation, there have been times when I've limited myself through my own limiting beliefs. And so and this sounds crazy to people when I tell them, but I struggle still to this day some days. I just closed. I'm not saying this to brag. I just want to give a point. I started selling sportswear. I'm a sports guy. Hats, shirts, T-shirts out of the trunk of my car to swap meet. Things are $5, $10, $20. Back then a hoodie might have been $25, $20. I just closed a $160,000 a year contract, biggest contract.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I don't say that to brag. I say it to say that there have been times when I never thought I could close a $100,000 contract in recent months, in recent years, right? I just say that. So the message that I would say is believe in yourself a little sooner. And what I mean by that is maybe you don't have the experience. Maybe you didn't have the background. Maybe you didn't have the training. Maybe you didn't have the upbringing. Maybe you didn't have the guidance. And I hear that as an excuse a lot. But believe that the resources for what you want are readily and easily available, if by no other way than our friend Google. You see, I didn't know anything about digital technically. I didn't know how to build a website. No one taught me how to build a website. I didn't buy no course to build a website. I learned on YouTube. My mom used to come to my house when my daughter was, my youngest child is, she's now 16, but she was 3 or 4 at the time. And I'm learning how to build a website on YouTube, sitting in the corner of my apartment at the time while I'm going through the mortgage crash, right? And the first time I hired a company, now I want to build my own WordPress website. And she would come in and my daughter would be watching Disney movies and she'd be like, Darrell, what you working on over there? And I'm like, I'm learning how to build a website. I'm like, okay. So I learned how to build a website. I learned how to edit video. I learned how to edit video back in the day when YouTube started. Nobody was there to teach me how to edit video. And by the way we edited video back then, it was off of traditional camcorders. And I would have to transfer the video from the camcorder through something called a FireWire, if anybody wants to look that up. And it would take like 8 hours to get an hour worth of video off the camera onto the computer. So everything that you may want to do is available, whether it's through a book, whether it's through podcasts like this, whether it's through YouTube videos. And again, don't get caught up in YouTube land and just get focused. And again, I think the other side of it is mentorship is key, but believe in yourself so that you can take that step, take that leap a little sooner. I've been blessed in my journey, but I look back and think there were plenty of times I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe myself.
Yeah. And to all my Rise listeners, Risepreneurs, Rise familiar out there, belief is so important. I mean, just a year ago, I didn't believe I could start a podcast, and here I am on a podcast. Not to brag, but I just got an email a week or two ago that we're number 87 on the Nigeria charts, and I was like, "What?
Come on,
Nigeria?
Come on!
All right, let's go. Let's keep climbing.
Let's go." I love it.
So something that just started at the end of this. Wait, no, we officially started at the beginning of this year. So I probably dropped one episode in December, I think. But yeah, like. It's crazy how life works, right?
The world is, and first of all, I salute you for taking that step, and we all get to it, man. But, I've listened to your show. I've listened to other interviews. What you're doing with this show is a great platform. I'm grateful that you invited me to be here today. And hopefully your audience has gotten something that, piques their interest or, help them with their thinking a little bit. But yeah, keep up the great work, man. It's an amazing platform that you're putting together.
Yeah, thankful and grateful to have you as well. So tell the people where they can find you, Darrell Evans. Give them all the links and the podcast too, because you got one too. Yeah. Let's promote you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so 2 places, right? So the podcast is called themindshiftpodcast.com, themindshiftpodcast.com, where everywhere you would listen to a podcast. We have been, we're on episode 50 right now. So we're picking up some steam. We're not too far ahead of you. We just got a little bit earlier start. But for anything else, just reach out to me either on social at Mr. Darrell Evans. The only reason it's Mr. Darrell Evans is because I wasn't the only Darrell Evans on the planet. And, but so at Mr. Darrell Evans, if you want to visit me on the website, get into more of my business, economic world or entrepreneurial world, marketing, sales, all that stuff, coaching, you can hit me up at darrellevans.net, darrellevans.net.
Awesome. So I'll get all those links from Mr. Evans. And I'll drop them in the notes for you if you're driving. So don't worry. Darrell Evans, thank you again. It's been a pleasure. And I'm pretty sure we're going to work again.
I appreciate
it. We're down the line.
Appreciate you having me again. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Rise Urban Nation.
Thank you for taking the journey.
Be sure to like, comment, and smash that subscribe button. And stay connected with Darrell on and off the show. Follow at Rise Urban Nation on all platforms.
Do what you love what you do. Don't chase the money. Let the money chase you.